Mike Parker, you've been the voice of the Beavers for how long now?
23rd year, Ted, this year.
23rd year.
Yeah.
So I lived through this once upon a time in my old days. We first met when I was doing Stanford games. And in 1999, Stanford went to the Coliseum and beat USC. And they hadn't done it in a while. And it was a big win on their way to winning the conference and getting into the Rose Bowl. And I'll never forget the reaction of Stanford's players to winning that game at USC. So for the Beavers, it had been a lot longer and a lot more frustration. What did that feel like for you Saturday night?
Well, I think it probably felt even more gratifying, satisfying, a sense, Ted, of jubilation for me and for long-suffering fans in Beaver Nation who, I've called games. I called a game in '99 down there in 2001 when Carson Palmer scored, beat Dennis Erickson's third team at Oregon State in overtime. That's the closest. Mm-hmm. Mike Riley had a team that lost to Pete Carroll's last team at USC 42-36, but that game was always a two-possession game, and the Beavers scored late to cut it to 6. They were never really threatening to win. Those are the only two games that on the scoreboard were close in the years that I've been going down there calling Oregon State USC games. And so I thought I was carrying that sense just going back to 99. But as you know, and was well documented, the Beavers hadn't won there since Tommy Prothro beat Johnny McKay in Coach McKay's first game in 1960 on September 16th, 14-0. And there really haven't been many close games. The average margin of defeat for the Beavers since then has been 24 points. The games have rarely been competitive. But I had a sense going in that this might be the year, so I prepped on 1960 trivia as much as I could and had Elmer Gantry, the apartment, Jack Lemmon, Shirley MacLaine references, Brenda Lee, who's sorry now, not the Beavers, just different, or I'm sorry, the Brenda Lee too. So I was prepping on pop culture, 1960 and what was kind of going on in the world. And I had never done that before on a trip to USC.
What gave you the vibe? What gave you that feeling?
Ted?
What gave you the feeling that this might be the one?
I think watching Jonathan and his team, and just to finish that thought, Beaver Nation, long suffering, enjoyed the win. USC has been that huge stumbling block. Now I've called a win in every venue as an Oregon State announcer in football, basketball, and baseball, but had not until the Beavers broke through and won in the Coliseum. So that was a nice box to be able to check. I think it meant in that sense, the 61 years of history, a lot more to Beaver Nation and people who've been around the program a lot longer than I have to see a win there. The players clearly thoroughly enjoyed it, but I don't even think the sense of the historical weight off there. I mean, it doesn't mean anything to them by comparison to all of us, but it was a win that everybody enjoyed. And so, to your other point, I kind of felt and sensed the Beavers had a real shot this time with the early firing of Coach Helton and some, not necessarily disarray, even the big win against Washington State, the 45-point run they went on when it was learned that Jackson Dart wasn't going to be able to play against the Beavers. I felt like that might even diminish a little bit of the enthusiasm that had been generated in Pullman when they go back to the guy that pretty darn good in Keaton Slovis in 2019, but hasn't quite been the same since then. So I just thought those factors were kind of lining up, and the way the Beavers were playing, the confidence they were playing with, the offensive line play, Chance Nolan coming out of nowhere, it seems, getting his chance and taking full advantage of it. Ted, I just felt like this might be the year. So I went all in on 1960 to finally get all that stuff out of there and say, okay, now we can set the 2021 Beavers alongside Tommy's team from 1960.
Okay, what have you felt since you've been back? Since Sunday, and the reaction from the locals and from Beaver Nation? It's
been really not unexpected, but really exciting, Ted, to see, as you know, in our town, it's all about Oregon State. I mean, it's one of the great things, and the phrase, the best college town in the Pac-12, it's not for nothing that we trot that phrase out there. I think it's a great college town with the focal point on Oregon State athletics. USC is probably glad that it's not the focal point right now this week with a lot of other stuff going on in Los Angeles. But win or lose, whatever the situation, Oregon State is everything here in the community. But there had been the crowds for the first two home games were small. They were thin. There's a lot of reasons You know, the opponents, the weather for Idaho was lousy. We have a mask mandate and proof of vaccination at the gate that has some people a little bit uncomfortable about that. Then other people have called the ticket office and said, you're not enforcing the mask mandate. Nobody's wearing a mask in the stand, so we're not coming. So they're kind of hearing criticism from both sides through the first couple of weeks, and the crowds were thin and people were reaching for a variety of explanations for why the stands were relatively empty for Hawaii and Idaho. It was so great to be sitting on the buses after the win Saturday night at the Coliseum, and our ticket director was on the bus. I said, Aaron, anything? He said, yeah, we're selling them now. At midnight, there were people on the phones beginning to order tickets, and it's been that way all week. So I think people are going to find their way through maybe a little bit of their uncertainty or angst or whatever about the world we're living in now, and are going to find their way into research. Ticket sales have been popping this week. I don't know if we can sell it out. I think we may fall a little short of that. But Aaron, the ticket director, told me that in 7 years, he's never had a week this busy selling tickets for an upcoming game.
So now, Mike, to the football side, we know, Jonathan, we've seen, you've lived it, close calls, but not winning those close games. What about this team has turned that corner?
Yeah, I think Yogi, and I don't remember, your partner Yogi Roth and such a great broadcaster himself, said that for the Beavers, I can't remember the phrase that he used, but it was apropos in that they've got to see it. Something tangible has got to happen. He had a much better, more colorful phrase in capturing it, as Yogi always does. But the upshot being these close games that you're referring to, the close calls, the heartbreaking finishes that they had throughout their 2-5 season last year in the odd COVID year. They were 2-5, did beat Oregon, but had a chance to win 3 or 4 other games and just couldn't quite finish. I think, perhaps they've turned that corner. Saturday night's going to tell us a lot when the Huskies come here to see if they can validate, follow up, and have another strong performance and get another win against a good program. But somehow in that USC game, just watching them function, they went down there with an absolute belief that we're supposed to win. It isn't like, if we hang around for a while, if we can keep it close and maybe get a break or two. The Beavers didn't play that way at all, as you saw and everybody saw. They went down and were the aggressor. They attacked. They ran the ball every which way. It was an unbelievable performance running the football. And even when they got hit in the mouth and gave up back-to-back touchdowns and were behind, they end up leading at halftime and then just took it from there. And just watching them, Ted, they bought into Jonathan's just brick by brick, day by day mantra. Jonathan's so even-keeled in his temperament that he's just instilled a sense of belief in these guys and not gotten too distraught over losses or too high over wins. Even his demeanor right after the USC win in the Coliseum, out on social media outlets, the video of Jonathan and the guys celebrating briefly. He said, you guys earned this, but hey, we ain't done yet. And everybody cheered that message. And I thought it was spot on. And Jonathan's handling of the team and the program to build it steadily without fear and fretting over things when they don't go well, just steadily building to have a game like that. Now it's a different kind of challenge. Can they come home and win when people think, quote, they should suddenly?
Yeah, that's it, Mike. That's it. So to spin it forward, that's the thing. Now the Beavs are going to run out there Saturday night. Whenever people see this, game may already been played, but that's a different dynamic, isn't it? Yeah. When you're supposed to win.
And I think, again, Ted, that's where Jonathan's temperament serves the program, his players, his young men well, in that just as they didn't get too carried away loosey-goosey in celebrating the win over USC, they enjoyed it. I mean, they were wielding the turnover chainsaw along the sideline at the Coliseum, taking it on the road with 4 takeaways. Jack Coletto gets an interception. They pick him 3 times. They force a fumble on Keaton Slovis. I mean, it was an impressive performance, not only by the offense, but the defense settled in and took it away 4 times too. So they were enjoying that. They were celebrating, but the confidence that I've seen throughout the week, the business-like approach in practice, even with media requests coming in all over the place now for Chance Nolan and BJ Baylor and Jonathan. It's a different kind of week. Sean Shepler, our SID, says it's been crazy. So But when you go to a practice and watch them work, it looks like they're getting ready for Hawaii or Idaho or anybody else. There isn't it's the same business-like approach that has served the program well through. I think it's similar to Mike Riley in that sense. I thought Mike also, Jonathan has learned from some great ones, hasn't he?
Yes.
He played for Mike. He played for Dennis. He coached with both. Chris Peterson, incredible influence. And Chris is pretty even-keeled in terms of his temperament too. So I feel like Jonathan learning from all of these great coaches. Dennis could be a little more emotional and volatile at times, but players love him. One of the all-time great players coaches.
Yeah.
Jonathan's a mix of all of these guys. And I think he's got his team's full attention and keeps them on that business-like track. And I expect them to play well with the spotlight on him Saturday night.
Mike, as we finish here, I'm thinking you started probably about Steven Jackson time, right? At Oregon State.
Little bit. Steve, I did see Steven's freshman year, 2001. Yeah. So but I was my first year was 99.
99. But you've seen Oregon State's had great running backs, right? I mean, from, I'm going back to Simonton and Steven Jackson all the way through Rogers and then Jamar Jefferson most recently. Right. Did you ever, to watch going into the Coliseum to run 51 out of 70 plays and hammer USC? I mean, I'm sitting here, I'm getting tingly because I can put myself in your chair and imagine how that must have felt.
Well, yeah, and there were times, and it was a variety of runs. Now, BJ Baylor, whether he ends up being a guy that's mentioned in the same breath with these others, no one expected that, quite frankly. I mean, there was going into the year, Jonathan talked about we don't have a or the Jamar Jefferson. We have three backs we really like in BJ Baylor and Deshaun Fenwick, the transfer from South Carolina, and Trey Lowe, a transfer from Washington. By the way, Jonathan's hit the portal pretty well and helped the program immensely through the portal, as Oregon State has not been up to now necessarily a major destination for four-star type guys, but on the kind of on the back end of it, when they go elsewhere and start and maybe don't have the type of experience they want, Jonathan has brought in a number of really high prospects coming out of high school here, and they're loving it. Guys like Avery Roberts and Trey Lowe and Deshaun Fenwick and others who've transferred in. That's a whole nother issue. But whether BJ Baylor becomes in that, that we start talking about him with Simonton and Jackson and Jaquiz and Evanson, Bernard and Jamar, I don't know, but suddenly he's popping. He rushed for 158 in the Coliseum, but the Beavers gave the football to nine different guys. Nine different guys gained yards running the football. Three different guys on fly sweeps on one drive. I mean, Todd Orlando, the USCD coordinator, and we were talking in the booth, Jim Wilson and I during the game, the analysts with me, just said, what do you adjust to now? I mean, you're going to take this away, but then the Beavers were doing everything well. The tight ends were part of a tremendous blocking scheme. And so you're right. I did get goosebumps when on one play in particular, it was a toss sweep left to BJ Baylor, student body left it was. And it just brought to mind, I mean, I grew up going to games in the Coliseum. I saw OJ on that play. I've seen Charles White and Marcus Allen and Clarence Davis and Ricky Bell, Anthony Davis. I've seen all of those guys run that same play in there. And here it was the Beavers in the Coliseum, as you said, running it down USC's throats to the tune of 322 yards. I've never seen the like. I don't know if I will again. It was amazing to see it that night in LA.
Mike, I'm just so thrilled for you. Well, look, 2021's been pretty good for Beaver Nation. Basketball?
Yeah.
Both basketballs, and now to have this football moment. And as you said, to see where it goes. I'm so happy for you and for Beaver Nation. That's why I wanted to get this out there. So hopefully people see this before Saturday, and I'll look forward to seeing you in Pullman.
I look forward to that too, Ted. And Saturday against the Huskies, whenever, the result may well already be known when some people are watching this, and we appreciate anybody tuning in, obviously. But if the Beavs do get through Washington, then each week the challenge becomes, the game itself, the magnitude of the game. We haven't had many seasons like that here, where 2000 is really the only one that comes to mind, where Dennis and that Fiesta Bowl team that ended up being in the Fiesta Bowl But that team was 3-1. Then they were 4-0, beat SC, lost to the Huskies in a classic, 4-1, and then ran the table. I know John Wilner's already put out what about the Beavers at 8-1? I mean, I know that I'm glad. Ted, all I can say is how much longer that's going to last. I don't know. I hope when I see you in Pullman, we're looking at a 4-1 team, and who knows. But the fact that they got some votes, that the estimable John Wilner is projecting a potential 8-1, I have no idea whether that can happen. But it's been a long time, and it's been fun to be around it.
Mike, thanks for doing this.
I appreciate you having me on, Ted. Thanks for thinking of us up here. We'll see you next week in Pullman.
Good job. All right, man. Mike, thanks for giving me the time. I love the background, by the way.
Oh, yeah. I'm in our 1240 Joe radio studios.
Oh, that's
Scott
smart.
Crichton in circa 2013, but there they are. It's my background here.
That's smart.
Hey, thanks, Ted. Hey, and maybe I'll reach out to you next week.
Sure.
To jump on the show if you have time.
Absolutely. Anytime. Okay. We'll see you next week, Mike. Thanks.
Thanks, Ted. Appreciate it. Bye-bye.